Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me well? I just want to check in and make sure that you can hear me well. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who will watch the replay, depending on where you're signing in from and when you're signing in. So I see so far we have Lima London. Good morning, Lima London. Good morning, Prophetess. Good morning, D'Angela. We had some technical difficulties, so sorry about that. We have a little bit of a delayed start, but we're still going to make it through. We'll wait for a few more people to sign in. I know some people will probably be like, what happened since we had a little delayed start, so we'll just wait and for a few more people to sign on in. Let's see, who else do we have here? I see the numbers going up. Who else do we have? Good morning. Good morning. It's day 19. Day 19. Good morning. Let's see, who else do we have in? Good morning, D'Angela. Blessings to you also. Blessings to you also. Thank you for being here with us. Good morning, Prophetess Kelly. Good morning. Let's see, who else do we have here? Talk to us. Talk to us in the chat. It's 5 a.m. Good morning. Okay, thank you, Lima. You can hear me good. Just want to make sure. Day 19. Can y'all hashtag for me day 19? Day 19. I'm going to type it in as well. Day 19. This is day 19 of our pre-gaming Code Blue series. Hashtag that. I got mine in. Day 19. Yes. Day 19. Thank you. Yes. Good morning. I see y'all in the comments. We're still waiting for a few more people before we get into it. Thank you for joining us via Facebook and YouTube. Make sure you tag, share, like, share with a friend, a family member, your timelines. Share, share, share. Day 19. Are we good on Facebook? Okay, I do see yes. We're good on Facebook. Day 19. Today we're going to be talking about emotional resilience, right? How many of you have experienced some things? Yesterday, Aisha talked about tests, us having tests in life. God sending us tests. Some of them we've passed. Some of them maybe we don't feel we passed, but we're still here. So we have to be doing something, right? So just talk to me. How many of you have experienced some tests, some testing in life? D'Angela, you? Yes, me too. Me too. Me too. Who else? Who else? How many of you have experienced some testing? And not just testing like in school. I'm talking about life tests. Yes, Prophetess, you too? Yes. Prophetess, you did a lot of testing in school. Tracy Chappelle, good morning, Tracy Chappelle. Yes, you say, yes, Lord, you've experienced some testing, right? In the past, currently, now in the present, and we know the truth is we're going to be experiencing even more tests, right? So April, yes, you too. Good morning, April. Yes, we still have some more people coming in. Good. I know we had some technical difficulties, but we are here now, and we're going to be talking about emotional resilience for day 19. We'll be talking about navigating life with emotional resilience, not just having it, but how we navigate life. What does it look like? This is a positive live today. They're positive on other days also, but this is one of those days where we're talking about pushing through for sure. That's what this live is going to be about. We're going to acknowledge how we got here, but pushing through. How many of you want to continue to push through in life? How many of you want to push through in life? You want to keep pushing. Sometimes we get knocked down, but we got to get back up. Donnie McClurkin has that song, "We Fall Down, but We Get Up." How many of you want to turn the times that we were victims and victimized into being a survivor? Anybody else but me? I'm going to wait and let y'all talk to me. You too, D'Angela? Yes. We want to be survivors. Yes, Prophetess, always pushing. You're always pushing. Tracy, you too. You want to be survivors, right? Yes, me too. Me too. Me too. Anybody else want to go from victims and being victimized to now being survivors, pushing through life, no matter what, passing the test, right? And sometimes we pass the test with 100. Sometimes we pass the test with a 90. I think the lowest is like 69, 70. That's when, you don't necessarily pass the test with flying colors, but you still took it and learned some things, right? In college, we used to have a joke saying C's get degrees. Any of y'all who went to college know that saying, C's get degrees. So when we're talking about passing the test, of course, we want to pass tests with flying colors, but sometimes that's just not the case. Sometimes we're not fully equipped, if we're going to be honest, right? So it's about, if we don't pass the test necessarily, we can at least take the experiences and take it again, right? So emotional resilience. Let's talk about resilience. Resilience is the psychological and emotional ability to adapt to adversity, trauma, or significant stress and from difficult experiences. So I'll say that again. Resilience. Resilience is the psychological and emotional ability to adapt to adversity, trauma, significant stress, and from difficult experiences, right? So life is not necessarily about avoiding things, but it's about staying regulated when life happens. So building that emotional resilience. And you can't build that emotional resilience if you do not have emotional pushback, emotional resistance. How many of you say the saying, protecting my peace? I'm protecting my peace. How many of you say that? Type me in the chat if you say that from time to time. I'm protecting my peace. How many of you say that? I know I say it, so I'm going to type me. Who else? I'm protecting my peace. How many of us have heard other people say that? Have you heard other people say they're protecting their peace? Right? Some people really do protect their peace. I've heard this a lot, and I've said it. April, you too. D'Angela, Tracy, Prophetess. We've all said it, or at least heard it. We're protecting our peace. So I just want to ask a question. This might be one of those ouch days because I want us to really talk to ourselves and really be honest about where we're coming from. And sometimes it's not even about being dishonest, just not aware. So this is one of those self-aware teachings today. So we're protecting our peace. So when we hear people say protecting their peace, sometimes it's the truth. Sometimes we're protecting your peace. You have to remove yourself from people, places, things, right? Sometimes you got to move out of an old neighborhood. Sometimes you can't pick up the phone for everyone like you used to, or just specific people like you used to. Sometimes you have to give up things. Sometimes it could be a job. It could be a car that's causing you trouble. Sometimes it could just be our own ways. Think about it. I'm getting older, so a lot of eating habits, I can't take it anymore. Everything now is too sweet. Everything is too loud. I'm changing. So it's a lot of things that I have to give up. Some people, they just drain me, so I can't necessarily answer their call and just sit on the phone for hours like I used to. Sometimes you just want to give somebody a solution, right? But what about the people, or even sometimes when we've been in a situation when we say we're protecting our peace, but we really just avoided things? Good morning, Pretty E. Jackson. Good morning, Alicia. We're talking about emotional resilience today. How many of us have done that or experienced that? Not people actually, or us actually protecting our peace, like avoiding people, places, and things. But what about the people that say they're protecting their peace, but they're just avoiding? And what does avoidance look like? It could be avoiding the pain we have experienced that wasn't our fault, right? Sometimes things we experienced, and a lot of times things we experienced was not our fault, right? So we can avoid that pain. Sometimes the pain we have allowed. Are we going to be honest? How many of us We're participants in our own pain. I know I have been. Made not so great decision, stayed in something too long, stayed at a job too long, stuck with a friend that I knew I needed to get away from. Some of us relationships, spent too much money, right? So we have been participants in our own pain. Who can admit that? You have been, I love it. Y'all telling the truth. Yes, I have also. We've been participants of our own pain, right? Sometimes we allowed the pain, right? We knew what it was. You know, they say if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. We saw that it was a duck. We were saying, no, it's a bird. It's a bird. It's not, I'm hearing it quacking, but it's a bird. It's not a duck, right? So sometimes we have allowed and sometimes even, you know, participated in the pain that we're experiencing. So we're not going to talk about that. We're not avoiding. When we say protect our peace, we're going to talk about building the emotional resilience. And remember, to build emotional resilience, we have to have emotional resistance and emotional pushback. So to bring it all in, all those tests we have experienced, those have assisted us in building emotional resilience, right? So let's talk about staying regulated when life happens. So 2 scriptures I have for you today. The first one is Isaiah 43:2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. I want to say that again. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Isn't that great? Sometimes we just want God to perform. How many of you have wanted God to perform, be it a miracle, get you out of a situation, right? How many of you have wanted God to perform? Say me if that's you in the chat. You've wanted God to perform something for you. Alicia, you got your hands raised. So you, yes. D'Angela, you too. Who else? You've wanted God to perform, right? You need that like never before, Pretty E. Jackson. Me too. Prophetess, you wanted God to perform. So here comes an ouch moment, and this is for myself included. We're all in this together. So this is, you know, they say we listen and we don't judge. So as I'm speaking to you all, I'm speaking to myself. We're all in this together. April, you too. So all the time we want God to perform. Sometimes we forget the most important part, just having his presence. What about that? It's the 2 P's, presence over performance. We know God can perform, but sometimes we forget the fact that he's present in what we're going through. So when it says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. That's presence. So when you pass through the waters, right? Just if I'm using my spiritual imagination, you know, let's picture ourselves in water. Sometimes we want the boat, right? We want the boat, or we want the helicopter to come down and swipe us and say, put us, I don't know what it's called, but you know how they lift them up and take the person to another location, right? How about we just ask God, instead of taking the better way out, sometimes the easy way out, how about we just ask for the presence? God, help me swim, help me walk through these waters. We forget that, right? Because we just want the performance sometime, right? Or propel, I'm not sure, D'Angelo. I can't remember what it's called, but I know when the helicopter drops the little ladder down, they take the person to the other location, right? But we're talking about the presence. We want God's presence, not always the Andre, right? So when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. So sometimes we have to remember to not ask God to perform or expect God to perform, but just appreciate his presence in whatever we are going through. Can y'all type that for me? Sometimes we have to just appreciate his presence. I want to type that as well, because we want God to perform all the time. We want money. We want new opportunities. We want relationships. We want God to perform, but sometimes we have to just be grateful for his presence, right? Can y'all type that for me? Sometimes we have to just be grateful for his presence. Y'all with me? Just want to make sure y'all with me. So like I said, God doesn't just perform all the time. Not sometimes, he's always present with us through all that we go through. It's like a cheat code. Yes, let's appreciate his presence. So the next scripture is 2 Corinthians 4, 8 and 9. We are hard pressed on every side, yet not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. So people and situations can shake us, maybe even shatter the box. But guess what? The situations, the people, whatever we go through, it cannot erase the oil we have. So can you say that for me? Some people and situations can shake, maybe even shatter the box, which is us, but they cannot erase the oil. Y'all still with me? I just want to make sure y'all with me. Yes, everybody's typing it for me. Thank you. Sometimes we just have to appreciate his presence, because sometimes the lesson is in appreciating the presence and not just waiting on the performance. So let's get into the teaching. Resilience is not emotional numbness. How many of us have been in a state where we have been emotionally numb? You don't feel anything, right? And these are natural responses. So don't feel judged, don't feel bad. We're going to get into nervous systems and how our body can work for us and sometimes against us, how the brain can protect itself. So a lot of the things that we're experiencing, it's not necessarily things that we could control from the past as we're experiencing it now, but we can change and control it as we move forward. So resilience is not emotional numbness. Thank you, Pretty E. Jackson. You saying you have been emotionally numb? Yes, I have also, right? So resilience is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to recover without collapsing. How many of you know a little bit about nervous system regulation? Let me know if you do know. We're going to learn a little bit about it. But nervous system regulation, how to regulate your emotions, to regulate your nervous system, because a lot of things that we're dealing with, the anxieties, even sometimes depression, outside of people who are have the chemical imbalance, a lot of things that we're dealing with, the ways we respond physically, emotionally, is due to our nervous systems being out of whack. Whether it be childhood, which a lot of it is childhood, but sometimes it's not necessarily childhood. It could be things you experienced as a preteen, as a teen, as an adult, as a young adult, in your 30s and your 40s, right? So we're going to be talking about nervous system regulation. So what is nervous system regulation? Nervous system regulation is shifting the body from a stress, that's the fight or flight, to a rest state. Can you repeat the part about resilience? Okay, Pretty E. Jackson. Resilience is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to recover without collapsing. And the definition of resilience that we spoke about earlier is the psychological and emotional ability to adapt to adversity, trauma, significant stress, and from difficult experiences. So I'll repeat it again. Resilience is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to recover without collapsing. So we might fall down on one knee, right? We might have a little wound. We might have a little wounded shoulder, but it is the ability to recover without collapsing, right? So think about boxers, right? Has anybody ever seen a boxing match? Sometimes the boxer gets hit, right? You can see the blood, you can see the scars, right? Sometimes that mouthpiece flies out. You see them sweating, but they're still fighting, right? Sometimes a boxer can get knocked down and they fall on one knee. They have the count. I think it's 10 seconds they have until they get up. So you have fighters that have been not knocked out, because, when you're knocked out, you do lose the fight as it pertains to boxing. But you can get knocked down and still get up and win. Did you know that? You can get knocked down and still get up and win if you think of boxing. Or even let's talk about other sports like basketball, football. Have you ever seen, I've seen it a bunch of times, a player maybe sprains their ankle just a little bit. I know in football sometimes they have injuries in their hands, like a sprained finger, but they've gone on to win games, right? So sometimes in life we have a sprain, sometimes we got knocked down, but you have to get back up. You can still win the fight, even if you've been knocked down, right? When you've been in life, when we get knocked out, we can get back up, but not necessarily in boxing, right? So resilience is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to recover without collapsing. And nervous system regulation is shifting the body from a stressed fight or flight to a rest state. Pretty E. Jackson says, that is me going through court for over a year. Okay, Pretty E. Jackson, I hope everything works out. How many of us have experienced things we perceive to be negative or maybe uncomfortable or even overwhelming? How many of us have experienced triggers or know what our triggers are? What are our triggers? Sometimes there's trigger words. Sometimes places can trigger you. Sometimes it could be a smell or a taste or a sound that can trigger you. Anybody out there with me know they have some triggers? Talk to me a little bit. You have some triggers. You've experienced some triggers. Yes, Pretty E. Jackson. D'Angelo, you said seasons. What you mean by that? What you mean about seasons? Talk to me a little bit. Yeah, I know I like to be a little interactive. Alicia, you have some triggers? Yes. Who else has some triggers? Let's see if we're going to be honest today. Triggers and traumas, yes. We all experience some type of trauma, and we all have some type of triggers. But we're going to be talking about how to be resilient with those triggers, right? Not to let the triggers control us. We control the triggers, right? April, you say you do too. Pretty E. Jackson says, I know mine, family, places, and yes, food smells like bacon in the court system. Yes, family can be very triggering. Family can be very, very triggering, right? Some of our families have systems and things that they do, and you know it's just not it, right? A lot of the generation now, we're unlearning a lot of things that occurred before us, right? So yes, those traumas and triggers. D'Angela, you have to be careful how you move. Yes, you do. So I have a little exercise for us when it comes to triggers, and I'm going to go slow. Good morning, Pastor K. I'm going to go slow, and this is just a challenge. You could think about it in the now. You could think about it in the past, and definitely want you to practice this while going into the future. Because we experience things. We've experienced things in the past. We experience things in the present. And we're going to experience things in our future, right? So you decide if you want to think back, you want to think it now, or of course, do this in the future. The next time you have an experience, be it new or something that is triggering from the past, right? When things happen, I want you to ask yourself, when things happen around you or to you, do I respond or do I react? Think about that, because there is a difference. Do I respond or do I react? Can y'all type that? Because I want you to ask yourself. Say it out loud and then type it as well. I'm going to type it here also. Do I respond or do I react? I just typed it. When you experience things, ask yourself, do I respond or do I react? Pastor K, you react? See, I love it. Let's be honest here. We're gonna change some of these ways. Do I respond or do I react? Think about a time in the past, right? This could be something as simple as road rage. Somebody cut you off. Did you respond or did you react? What about those with children? Your children spilled the milk on the counter. Did you respond to that or did you react? Did you blame the child or did you say, as the adult, I shouldn't have left this milk out instead of going off on the 3-year-old, right? That's being the 3-year-old. Think about that. When somebody says something that they already know will get to you, because some people know our pressure points and our trigger points, right? And some people do it on purpose because sometimes we wear our emotions on our sleeve. People have seen us react in the past. In the moment or in the past, whenever I'm experiencing something, do I respond or do I react? Who else can say? Miss Bonnie, you said in the past you've reacted. I know Pastor K said she reacted. I've been both. I think I'm more of a responder now, but in the past I have been a reactor, and we're human. I can't say that I won't react in the future, but I try my best. And sometimes it's hard to just take that moment and breathe, right? But we have to sit and reflect in that moment. Am I responding or am I reacting? What happens when the boss, the supervisor says something slick, right? You've been both? Okay. Pretty E. Jackson says, I tend to react when it comes down to law enforcement, but other times, especially now, I respond. Yes. With law enforcement, they can be a lot, but a lot of times it's a lose-lose. So we have to be mindful how we respond, right? We don't necessarily want to react. You want to respond, because when you respond, that means you've taken the time to assess the situation, assess yourself. What am I feeling? Did your heart rate go up? Is your chest beating? Are you sweating? Right? A lot of times physically we can see something has affected us. We have to learn to respond and not necessarily react. Reacting is quick. Response has some thought to it. When you react, you didn't think about nothing. You just automatically respond. So just keep in mind, when things happen, ask yourself, do I respond or do I react? So if we're going to take it to the future, the next time you have an experience and you say, okay, wait a minute, my breathing is getting heavy, I'm sweating a little bit, I'm a little, upset. Do I want to respond or do I want to react? Pastor K says, I'm learning to respond instead of react. Yes, because reacting has what? Reacting has cost us a lot. Sometimes we say things that can never be taken back. Sometimes we have gotten physical, right? Reacting costs too much. Can somebody type that for me? Reacting costs too much. D'Angela says, I reacted, but now I got to see what's operating and don't need to respond. Yes. Reacting costs too much. Now, a response, sometimes it can cost you, right? But it's a little cheaper sometimes because you thought it through, right? Yes, reacting costs too much. Yes. Right? Yes, reacting costs too much. So remember, the next time we're going to ask, do I want to respond or do I want to react? Right? Now let's go on to my next point. We're going to remember we're talking to ourselves and we're being honest. So say it out to yourself and think, in life, am I proactive or am I reactive? Let me know. Am I proactive or am I reactive? Talk to me, y'all. Am I proactive or am I reactive? Proactive, you plan before. You anticipate whatever's going on. With being reactive, you just let things happen and then you respond after the fact. So one is beforehand and one is after the fact. All right? Pretty E. Jackson, you say you're both. Dion, you say you're both. Miss Bonnie, you say you're proactive. I'm a little bit of both also, but I'm more proactive and I've learned to be proactive. I was reactive for many years, but I have learned to be proactive because it is better to plan. What is that saying? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So I'm on the proactive side a little bit more, right? So the first was, when things happen, ask yourself, do I respond or do I react? Number 2, in life and in situations, am I proactive or am I reactive? Let me see what the comments are saying before I move on. April, you said proactive mostly at work. What about in life, April? Miss Bonnie, you've learned too? Yes. D'Angelo, you've learned too? Yes. See, that's emotional resilience. We're learning from these tests and the lessons. The next, think about this and be honest with yourself. If you don't want to be honest in the chat, fine. Be honest with yourself at least. Have my experiences made me bitter or better? Think about that. Have my life experiences made me bitter or better? I'm going to leave that for a second. Have my experiences made me bitter or better? Pretty E. Jackson says, before I came on, I saw a post saying we need to talk to ourselves more. Yes, we do. We have an inner voice. We have an inner critic. We have an inner critic that tells us some negative things about ourselves. We have to learn to have the positive critic. In the cartoon, it's like the angel and then the devil on the shoulder. We have to learn to talk back to ourselves when we have those negative thoughts that are telling us to do wrong or think negative about ourselves. So yes, Miss Bonnie says better. Alicia says better. D'Angelo, you said both. Thank you so much for your honesty. But I hope you can change that bitter to completely being better. I hope so. In God's timing, you can go from bitter and have no bitterness lingering and just be better. So number 3, have my experiences made me bitter or better? Now this next one, this is a big one, right? And I want us to really be honest about it. And sometimes we will have to think about it. And I hope this stays with you. Alicia says, I've had a season of being bitter. However, now I'm better. Now, let me talk about bitterness, right? Let's talk about experiences. Let's talk about pains that we've had. You ever heard of the saying toxic positivity, right? Some people are just too positive, right? It's just you going through the worst thing ever and they automatically want to go to prayer. Now, that is the right thing. But if we're going to talk about being human, sometimes you don't want to hear scripture, right? Who's willing to admit that? Sometimes in life, you don't want to hear scripture right now. You don't want to hear positive. You don't want to hear, and these are the worst words when someone is upset. What is the worst thing you want to hear? Calm down, right? Calm down. It's not that serious. Because when you're triggered, you're not thinking. You're not ready to respond. You're ready to react. When you're triggered, you are reactive. When you're triggered, that bitterness that you thought was healed, that you thought was down low, it can come up very easily. So it's an ongoing job. It's not one of those things that you just necessarily fix. Sometimes it's an ongoing thing, right? So I hope everyone can turn their bitterness into being better. But the next one, this is very, very important. When you experience a trigger, right? Ask yourself, am I in the present or am I in the past? I want to leave that there for a second. Am I in the present or am I in the past? Yes, Miss Bonnie, a lot of us have been bitter and people don't want to talk about the process of going through things and growing through things and forgiveness, sometimes reconciliation. Sometimes bitterness is a part of the process. It's very normal to be bitter. It's very normal to be angry, sad. It's just important that we don't stay there. And that's what builds the emotional resilience when we talk about moving through those feelings, right? So when you experience a trigger, am I in the present or am I in the past? Right? Because most of our triggers come from the past. So when it looks like what it was in the moment, sometimes we're in the past. We don't even realize in the moment, I already survived that. This is triggering that and it's bringing it up, but I already survived that. I already made it through that. Not that it didn't happen, because you don't want to downplay it or avoid it, but we want to say, I made it through that already. You know, God delivered me from that already, right? So am I in the present or am I in the past? Let's talk about people who let's get to it. Let's talk about, let's say, violence. You have individuals that have come from a violent home, right? Violent experiences. And let's say someone starts yelling. It takes them back to a time when someone was yelling at them. Maybe when they were up against the wall, maybe when they were 5 years old and someone in the home was yelling, right? So am I in the present or am I in the past? D'Angela says, majority of the time it's something I haven't dealt with or in the process of the deliverance. Yes, so we have to deal before we heal. Can somebody type that? Deal and then heal. Deal and then heal. I want to type that myself also. Deal and then heal. You can't heal what you don't deal with. Healing is a process. God doesn't need our help to heal, but we need God's help to heal. Deal, then heal. Yes. Prophetess says, sometimes in the present we can struggle with the past. Yes, because that's what triggers are. Triggers are a reminder of the past. It's like when you have a scar and then somebody ripped off the scar. So now you're feeling that pain all over again, right? Because you were in the process of healing, but somebody ripped it right on open. So we had, do I respond or do I react? In life, am I proactive or reactive? Have my experiences made me bitter or better? Am I in the present or am I in the past? And this one is, I would think, the most important for today. Y'all ready for this one? Let me know y'all ready. Type in the chat, I'm ready. I'm ready. Let me know you're ready for the next one. I think this is one of the most important, and it ties everything together. I'm waiting to see y'all tell me. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. D'Angelo, you ready? Who else? Who else is ready? Pretty E. Jackson, you ready? April, you ready? Let me get two more, and then I'm going to give it to you. You ready, Alicia? Dion, you ready? Good morning, Dion. Are the experiences in your past lessons learned or lessons lingering? Tracy, you ready? Are experiences, and I'm talking to myself also, are experiences in my past lessons learned or lessons lingering? Think about that for yourself. Are the experiences in your past lessons learned or lessons lingering? Because if it's still lingering, it's going to come back around. Pretty E. Jackson, you have both? Okay. I think I've learned. And sometimes you think you've learned the lesson until it presents itself again. What about that? You think you've learned the lesson until it presents itself again, right? Lessons learned for sure. Okay, Dion. April, you said both, so some are still lingering. But the good thing about that, what I'm seeing from everybody who may be saying they react, who are being honest about being reactive and being bitter, or sometimes even going into the past, it's self-awareness, right? So you have the self-awareness to know that these are areas that you can improve upon. And that's the start. That's the start. Because now that you've revealed, you can deal, and then later or even sooner begin to heal. So let's talk about emotionally resilient people. So emotionally resilient people, they feel deeply, but without drowning. A lot of people think that you're strong when you don't feel. That's not the case. You're strong when you're able to feel and still move through life. When you're able to feel and still be kind, when people have caused you harm, but you're still able to be Christ-like, you're still able to move through life with grace, with kindness, with generosity, with forgiveness. How many of you are good at forgiveness? I'm great at forgiveness. I'm not great at reconciliation, because I don't really believe in reconciliation sometimes. So I don't know. I have to work in that area. But forgiveness is key, right? Forgiveness is key. So emotionally resilient people feel deeply without name the feeling, and then you have to tame the feeling. Can y'all type that for me? Name the feeling and tame the feeling. And what I mean by that is sometimes the things that we are experiencing are not okay, right? They're not fair. Some of the things we experienced were not fair. They were not our fault, right? But we have to control how we respond, right? We have to control how we respond, because reacting costs too much. Being bitter hinders our blessings, right? Staying in the past delays our future, right? So we name that feeling and we tame that feeling. Because why? Reacting costs too much, right? Being bitter delays our blessings. Being bitter delays us from being better, right? Staying in the past delays our future. And sometimes it even affects our present. Most of the times it's affecting our present and definitely our future, right? If the lessons aren't learned, we will continue to repeat the same mistakes. We have to learn the lesson, right? We have to learn the lesson. In school, when you're having trouble with the lesson, who do you go try to get? A tutor, right? You get some extra help from the teacher, right? You get some help from a tutor. You get some help from somebody who knows the material a little bit better than you do. How many of us have trouble asking for help? I used to, not anymore. How many of us have trouble asking for help? How many of us, it's not even about asking. Sometimes people offer help and we don't want to accept the help. Have you ever been there? Somebody offers help, but you don't want to accept it. You got too much pride. You got too much control. I want it done this way because you think your way is the best way and the only way. Not knowing somebody else may do something better than you. They may know not necessarily a better way, but a different way. Yes, Pretty E. Jackson, we don't like feeling needy, right? Because there was a time most likely when we needed someone and they didn't show up for us. They didn't show up for us at all, or sometimes the right way. So you do realize, and I experienced this as well, so I'm not putting you on blast, but when we come from a place when we don't feel needy, that comes from somewhere. We are designed to connect. We are designed to have community. So why is it that we don't want to lean on each other? Because we have had bad experiences when we've asked for help, or maybe when we didn't ask for help. As a child, help should be given without asking. You can't even talk from 0 to 1.5, 2. 2, you start saying, 1, you start saying some words. So what happens when we don't want to feel needy? We suffer in silence. So sometimes we have control issues. Any control freaks on the line want to be honest? They have to control everything. Because why? They don't feel like someone else can do the job as best as they can. And it's not necessarily negative. Some people have had bad experiences where they went to people and needed people to show up for them, and they were disappointed. They were let down, right? So now we don't want to feel needy. We don't want anybody to feel like we needed them, right? I don't need them, right? What about when we were humble and did go ask for help and people threw it in our face? It took us a lot of humbling to even ask for the help, right? We asked for the help and then someone threw it in our face. Pretty E. Jackson, you say you're not controlling, even though people say I am. How many people? Pretty E. Jackson. Bonnie, you too, you will forgive, but I don't forget. Yes, I don't forget. I forgive, but I do not forget. Reconciliation, I have to work. Me, what you saying me too, Dion? I know I asked a bunch of questions, right? But people have thrown things in our face, so we don't want to ask anybody for help. We try to control the situation, right? those, and we're going to get into fight and flight. We're closing up, but a lot of the ways that we are due to our nervous system previously being dysregulated. So now we have patterns. Now we have ways of thinking that lead to patterns and behaviors that we're using just to survive. It's survival. It's survival. Control. Okay. So yeah, some of us deal with control issues, right? So remember, emotionally resilient people feel deeply without drowning. So we have to name the feeling, then tame the feeling, right? Sometimes we talked about responding, right, instead of reacting. And I know a lot of people have trouble with this because they have to say something. Do you know sometimes no response is the best response? What about that? Sometimes no response is the best response. I am the queen of that. No response sometimes is the best response. But some people, they gotta say something back. They have to have the last word. You know, when you don't respond, when somebody says something silly, when you don't respond, right? You give somebody to think about the dumb stuff they just said, or the horrible stuff they just did. A lot of times people who like to argue, it's a distraction, especially somebody who's arguing to deflect from accountability, right? I like to let people sit in their silence. Like, just think about what you just said. Think about what you just said. Think about what you just did. And it's not always, sometimes we have to just let people deal with the consequences of their action with love, right? It's not always us trying to teach a lesson, us trying to be, mean about it. But sometimes you have to just let people sit in their decisions. And sometimes we have to sit in the decisions and sit in the consequences of our actions because we have to learn, right? We want the lesson to be learned. And when we learn the lessons, we're able to be emotionally resilient because we talk about being victims, but sometimes we're the villain. Sometimes we're the villain in the story. Sometimes we said something that wasn't nice. Sometimes we did something that wasn't nice. Sometimes we're a little selfish in the area and we didn't think about how it would affect other people, right? Especially those people that go from being like people pleaser. You ever see like the spectrum, people go from one extreme to another. It was like you were so kind and now they're just so mean and just so tough because they've had negative experiences, right? So emotionally resilient people feel deeply without drowning. So we have to name the feeling, then tame the feeling. Sometimes we can respond, but remember, sometimes no response is the best response. Emotionally resilient people experience stress without spiraling, right? I get on everybody's nerves because I always say, let's think about that. When something happens, I want to sit on it. I want to think about it. How do I respond? If I'm going to respond, I tell people, no, I don't think you should say that. Drives me crazy. People that take everything to Facebook and Instagram. You could tell, you have some people on your Facebook, right? When the couple broke up, right? They delete all the pictures, right? When the couple broke up, when the family's beefing. I've been nosy before. Let's be honest. If you went through all of the comments and now you know the whole family story because you clicked this comment, you put 2 and 2 together, right? How many of you are going to admit that you do that on Facebook? We nosy sometimes. We nosy. Yes, we have those people. So it's important to experience the stress without spiraling. We don't want to spiral. We don't want to go to Facebook. We don't want to quickly respond. Well, not respond. We don't want to quickly react to a situation, right? Sometimes you say something and you can't take it back. Sometimes, have you ever reacted to something and you be like, dag, I shouldn't have reacted like that. It wasn't even that serious. But you already said something. You already have done something, right? That's the people in the middle of an argument, you blocking and unblocking somebody. It's like, it wasn't even that serious, right? It wasn't even that serious, right? Yes, you don't want to spiral. Emotionally resilient people experience stress without spiraling. And why? Some people are emotionally resilient because they know what it cost them when they reacted the wrong way, right? So in order to be emotionally resilient, most likely you have some scars. You have some situations where you handled it wrong. You wish you never said that. You wish you didn't do that. You wish you never allowed that. You wish you never participated in that. You wish you never went there, right? You wish you never even met a person sometime. Like, why did I even meet them? Why did I even hang out with them, right? That happens. So we have to learn to experience the stress without spiraling. We have to learn to stay grounded in the moment, and that's easier said than done. Some people, it's breathing techniques. Some people got to count to 10. Some people need to walk away. Whatever your technique is, figure it out and learn to experience the stress without spiraling. Pay attention to your body when you're experiencing stress. Are you starting to sweat? Are you getting anxious? Are you moving around? Pay attention. Those can tell you what's going on with you, right? We have to pause before reacting. Emotionally resilient people pause before reacting. And I would like to even say pause before responding, right? Miss Bonnie, you stay quiet. I get quiet too. When I'm very upset, I get quiet. You ever see some people cry when they're really mad. I've seen people like that. There was a kid in high school. He used to fight and he could win the fight, but he would be crying. It was the most confusing thing ever. All right. Some experiences, we're just going to be triggered. And it could be physical or it could be emotional, right? And we're going to talk about fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And we're bringing it home now. But fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Do you know which one you are when it comes to the nervous system being dysregulated or being triggered? Because when our nervous system is triggered, we go into survival mode. And based on what we have experienced in the past, if we have not cultivated the emotional resilience, it can put us in these response modes when we experience trauma or emotional triggers, right? So we have fight. We know fight is you ready to go. You aggressive. You ready to defend. You deflect, and it doesn't have to be physical. This could be a verbal altercation. It doesn't even have to be a verbal altercation. It could be just a trigger, like someone said, the sound or a taste. So in that moment, you want to fight. You can get Pretty E. Jackson says, you a fighter? Okay. Deflection, right? When you arguing with somebody expresses to you how you hurt them. You say, well, what about you? Well, what about you? One thing I can't take when I'm talking to someone, it could be a friend or even a romantic partner. And when you get to the point where you're expressing what they did to you or how they made you feel, and in that moment, they want to talk about all of this stuff that you did. Now, I want to hear everything that I did, but why you want to bring it up now? Right? That's somebody in fight mode, right? When you're expressing how you are hurt, they have to bring up how you hurt them. And they were never going to say it to you. They were never going to say it to you. So I'm not talking about a mutual conversation here. We're talking about with somebody now all of a sudden wants to bring up everything that you've done to them, right? So that's fight. Pay attention to that. That's anger. That's defensiveness. That's deflection. Somebody that wants to get down to it. Now let's talk about flight. We know flight. People who have the flight response, they're out of there. Those are the runners. Those are the avoiders. When times get tough, they run. They head for the hills, right? So that's one of the responses. Freeze. When you talk about freeze, that's someone that's stuck. When earlier a few people admitted that they were emotionally numb, when you're emotionally numb, you're in the freeze state. When you experience a trigger, an uncomfortable experience, freezing, you just stay stuck. You're just frozen in place. You're numb. And now what is fairly new in the last couple of years, they talk about fawn, right? So we got fight, flight, freeze, and now fawn. Those that fawn, those are the people pleasers. People pleasing is very dangerous. So fawning, that's people pleasing. You just want to appease, right? Whatever's going on, the person, if it's a person, if it's a situation, you may turn to substances to numb that, right? You just give into it, right? So think about that. You flight, you out of there, Bonnie, Miss Bonnie? You out of there? Okay. So we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So we have to pay attention when we're triggered. What is our nervous system response? Because if we want to be emotionally resilient, we have to pay attention to how we emotionally respond. What is our emotional state, right? D'Angela, you said you like to talk things out. Okay, good stuff. With emotionally resilient people, they return to balance a little bit more quickly. So when they experience a trigger, they can return to their balance, right? Those are the people that can say, okay, this is the past. It's not necessarily the present. Or if it is the present, how do I want to deal with this, right? Maybe I need to step away. Maybe I need a moment, right? Maybe I need to talk this out, like you said, D'Angela. So it's being aware of what you're experiencing. That's it. Being aware, right? And we're not just talking about the secondary emotions, because those are easy, like anger. That's a secondary emotion. But a lot of people who are experiencing anger, when you see anger, it's something under that. It's fear. It's sadness. So we have to understand the emotional responses, our primary feelings, our primary emotions, which lead to sometimes coming out in another way. Secondary, those people that you meet that are just nasty, they just always have an attitude. Something's going on under there. Something's happening there, right? Emotionally resilient people recover stronger and often quicker, right? And how do we grow this resilience? We grow this resilience when emotions are processed and not suppressed, right? We grow this resilience when emotions are processed. So we have to feel our feelings. Remember, name and tame, reveal, deal, then heal. We're not getting anywhere by ignoring what we've experienced, ignoring what we're feeling. All it does is put it somewhere else, and it comes out in other ways. That's why we're aggressive. That's why we sometimes have these anxieties. That's why sometimes you just wake up and you're just sad. You're just irritated. I know me. I can get very easily irritated. I've come a long way, but I had to sit and realize what is happening. Why am I so easily irritated, right? Why am I so easily frustrated? Why do I isolate and don't want to be bothered? Now, sometimes isolation can be positive, but sometimes it can be negative. So resilience grows when emotions are processed. So we're not going to suppress anymore. Remember, we're going to reveal, heal, and deal. We're going to name our feelings, and then we're going to tame our feelings, right? We are not going to be respond in life. We are not going to be reactive, but we are going to be proactive. We are not going to allow life's experiences to make us bitter. We're going to allow those experiences and situations to make us better. When we experience triggers, we're going to identify if we're in the past or the present, and we're going to make a plan to how we deal with that in the future, right? The experiences in our past and the experiences that we're going to experience, because life keeps lifing, right? We are going to face them as lessons learned and not lessons that we're going to allow to just linger, right? So resilience grows when the nervous system is regulated. So we regulate it. We get it back to a calm state. Now, some of us have a little bit more work to do because our nervous system is dysregulated due to childhood. So it's a lot of messages, a lot of experiences that we have that put us in survival states, right? And that causes us to behave the way we behave. All of the behaviors that we exhibit, it came from somewhere, right? The coworker that acts a certain way, the child that acts a certain way, that family member that acts a certain way. Somebody talked about family. It comes from somewhere. So we have to remember to process and not suppress the emotions. We have to make sure we have a nervous system that is regulated, right? Resilience grows when support is allowed. We're honest and say, I need help, right? It's okay to not be okay. And I learned that in the last couple of years of my life. It is okay to not be okay, right? Sometimes we need outside help. It could be self-help. It could be speaking to a pastor. It could be speaking to a friend. It could be speaking to a therapist. So emotional resilience grows when support is allowed. You use the tools. One thing we have now that generations before us didn't have, we have all these textbooks. We have Google, we have Chat GPT, we have all these evidence-based practices and studies that can literally give us a guideline on how to become better people emotionally. And just remember, the last thing that I want to say, healing does not remove hardship, but it changes how we carry it. Healing helps us more equipped to deal with life's challenges. So hardship is not going anywhere. The tests aren't going anywhere. The triggers aren't necessarily going anywhere. We can learn to better identify the triggers and remember respond to the triggers, but these things are not going anywhere. We just have to learn to carry it a bit better. And what's so amazing about us being able to carry it as Christians, we have God to carry it with us. So sometimes don't focus on the performance, right? Let's focus on God being present with us while we continue to build this emotional resilience. So I thank you all for participating as usual. Type in with me in the chat and staying with me for this hour. I hope I was a blessing to you all. Please join us tomorrow again as we continue the series. And in addition to that, this Sunday also, and we do have some extra announcements that I'll run the flyers at the end with Code Blue. Protege, that Prophetess has her new ebook, so I'll run all those flyers. But before we get off, if you have been blessed today by this word, please sow a seed. I will put the ways to sow at the bottom. So since it is day 19, can you, if you can you sow a seed of 19 or as close to it as possible? If God puts on your heart to sow more than that, please feel free to do so. The ways to sow are right there at the bottom. You see the Cash App, the PayPal, the Zelle. And again, I hope I was a blessing. Thank you. Thank you, April. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, D'Angela. Thank you, Miss Bonnie. I'm glad that God was able to use me and I was a blessing to you all. So remember, we're going to be practicing emotional resilience. We practice a lot of things. Singers practice. In the gym, we're practicing. We have to learn to focus on that internal, right? That internal directs the external. So we're going to practice building emotional resilience. All right. Thank you all for being with me. You all have a blessed day. Thank you, Lima London. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prophetess. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day. We over here in New York dealing with this blizzard. All I see is white when I look outside. Yes, continue to sow, please. I'll wait a few more seconds to give people the opportunity to sow. The ways to sow at the bottom. Please sow a seed of 19 or as close to it as you can get. And join us tomorrow. Thank you all for being with us today.